The stars above Earth flickered and died. One by one, the lights in the night sky vanished behind something massive. Something that blocked out the universe itself. Park Eunice stood on the deck of her ship, the research vessel Horizon, and watched the sky turn dark. She was 34 years old, a captain in the Pacific Fleet, and she had seen many strange things in her years at sea. But nothing like this. Nothing that made her heart stop beating for a full second. The alien fleet emerged from the darkness, like metal monsters being born from nothing. 2,000 ships. Maybe more. They filled the sky from horizon to horizon, each one bigger than any building humans had ever made. Their hulls were black and red, covered in symbols that hurt to look at. Lights blinked across their surfaces in patterns that seemed angry, hungry. In Seoul, alarms began to scream. In Tokyo, people ran through the streets. In New York, Los Angeles, London, and Paris, the same scene repeated itself. Billions of humans looked up and saw the end of their world hanging above them. The Vorath Empire had arrived. Admiral Dennock stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conqueror's pride, and felt nothing but boredom. He had done this 17 times before. 17 star systems had fallen to his fleet. 17 species had knelt before the Vorath or been turned to ash. This blue planet would be number 18. He studied the reports his officers brought him. The natives had primitive technology. Chemical rockets, nuclear weapons, radio signals that leaked into space like the crying of children. They had no shields, no energy weapons, no faster-than-light travel. They were insects waiting to be stepped on. "Send the message," Dennock ordered. His voice was flat and cold. "Give them 6 hours to surrender. If they refuse, begin the bombardment." The message went out in every human language. The aliens had been listening to Earth's broadcasts for years as they approached. They knew how to speak to their prey. "People of Earth," the message said, "you are now property of the Vorath Empire. Surrender your governments, your resources, and your lives. Resistance means death. You have 6 hours in a military bunker deep beneath Seoul." General Kim Tae-sik listened to the message and felt his hand shake. He was 60 years old. He had served his country for 4 decades. He had fought in wars and won medals and buried friends. But this was different. This was not a war they could win. Around him, screens showed the chaos spreading across the planet. Missiles launched from submarines and silos, racing toward the alien ships. The general watched them fly upward, tiny sparks of hope against the darkness. Then he watched them die. The alien ships did not even move. They simply glowed for a moment, and the missiles turned to dust. Fighter jets scrambled from bases around the world. The best pilots humanity had to offer flew toward the enemy with bravery in their hearts. They lasted less than 3 minutes. The alien weapons did not shoot bullets or missiles. They shot light itself, beams of pure energy that cut through metal like water through paper. General Kim closed his eyes. "Is there nothing we can do?" His phone rang. The caller ID showed a name he knew well. Dr. Park Doan, marine biologist, stationed at the Jeju Deep Ocean Research Center. The general's niece's husband. A man who studied fish and ocean currents. Why was he calling now? At the end of the world? General Doan's voice was shaking. "I need to speak with you. It's urgent. There might be something." "A very small chance. I'm listening." On the horizon, Yuna received a call from her brother at the same time. Doan's face appeared on her screen, pale and sweating. Behind him, she could see monitors filled with data she did not understand. Charts and graphs and numbers that meant nothing to her. "Yuna," he said, "I need you to come to Jeju now. Bring your ship and your crew. Tell no one where you're going. Go on. The world is ending. I have orders to forget your orders. This is bigger than orders. This is bigger than anything." He leaned closer to the camera. His eyes were wild. "Do you remember what I told you 5 years ago? About what we found in the Mariana Trench? About the thing sleeping in the deep?" Yuna remembered. She had thought her brother was joking. She had laughed at him. A creature 3 kilometers long? A living thing bigger than any animal that had ever existed? Impossible. fairy tales, monster stories for children. But Doan had not been joking. He had shown her the sonar images. He had played her the recordings. Strange sounds from the deepest part of the ocean. Sounds that did not match any known animal. Sounds that seemed almost like breathing. "It's the old one," she whispered. "Yes," Doan nodded. "It's been sleeping for 60 million years, maybe longer. We've studied it from a distance. We've never dared to get close. But now," he looked at the ceiling, at the invisible enemy waiting above. "Now we might not have a choice." 4 hours later, Yuna stood in a concrete room beneath Jeju Island. General Kim was there. So was Doan, along with a team of scientists who looked like they had not slept in days. On the wall, a screen showed the alien fleet. On another screen, sonar images showed something impossibly large resting at the bottom of the sea. "Let me understand this," the general said slowly. "You want to wake up a monster? A real monster. Something we know nothing about. And you think this monster will fight the aliens for us?" "I think it's our only chance," Doan said. "Every time we've sent probes near it, the energy readings go crazy. It generates electromagnetic fields we can't explain. It's not just biological. It's something more. Something powerful. And if it attacks us instead?" Doan had no answer for that. "Why?" Una stepped forward. "I'll do it. I'll take the Horizon down to the trench. My crew is the best. If anyone can reach it, we can." The general looked at her for a long moment. Outside, they could hear distant explosions. The aliens had begun landing troops in coastal cities. Time was running out. "Do it," he said finally. "May God forgive us all." 1 hour later, the Horizon began its dive into darkness. Above them, the world burned. Below them, something ancient was waiting. The ocean grew darker with every meter they descended. First the blue faded to gray. Then the gray faded to black. Then there was nothing at all, except the tiny lights of the horizon pushing through water that had never known the sun. Una sat in the captain's chair and watched the depth counter climb. 1,000 meters. 2,000. 5,000. The pressure outside was enough to crush a normal submarine, like an empty can. But the Horizon was not a normal submarine. It was built for exactly this kind of mission, with walls of reinforced titanium and special systems that could survive the deepest places on Earth. Her crew of 12 worked silently at their stations. They were scared. She could see it in their faces, in the way their hands moved a little too fast, a little too nervous. But they were also brave. They had volunteered for this mission knowing they might never come back up. Lieutenant Cho Murray sat at the communications station. She was Yuna's oldest friend. They had grown up together in Busan, swimming in the same ocean that now surrounded them. Murray had always been the calm one, the steady one, the one who never panicked. But even she looked worried now, Captain Murray said. "We're getting reports from the surface. The aliens have landed troops in 12 cities. Seoul, Tokyo, Shanghai, Mumbai." Her voice cracked. "They're not taking prisoners." Una felt cold inside, but she kept her face blank. A captain had to be strong. A captain could not show fear. Focus on the mission. "That's all we can do right now," Chief Engineer Beek Sunho called out from his station. "Passing 8,000 meters? Hull pressure at 92% maximum. All systems functioning normally." Sunho was the youngest member of the crew, only 26 years old. He was thin and wore glasses and looked more like a student than a soldier. But he was the best engineer Una had ever worked with. He could fix anything, understand anything, build anything. If anyone could keep the Horizon alive in these depths, it was him. The radio crackled. Doan's voice came through, distant and full of static. "Una, can you hear me? We're losing signal. The depth is interfering with communications." "I hear you. What do you need to tell us?" "The probes we lost over the years, they weren't random. I've been studying the data. Every probe that got close to the creature was playing certain sounds. Sonar pings, engine noises, things like that. But the ones that got closest before they were destroyed, They were all playing low-frequency tones. Very specific patterns. Yuna leaned forward. You think that's how we communicate with it? I think that's how it wakes up. Maybe it's a signal. Maybe it's a language. I don't know. But I'm sending you the frequency pattern now. When you're close enough, play it and pray. The data file appeared on Morey's screen. She downloaded it and loaded it into the external speakers. Got it. Ready when you are, Captain? They descended further. 9,000 meters. 10,000? The lights outside showed nothing but endless darkness. It was like falling into a void. Like sinking into a place where nothing existed and nothing could survive. And yet something did survive down here. Something impossibly old and impossibly large. At 10,500 meters, Sunho suddenly sat up straight. Captain, I'm getting readings. Electromagnetic interference. It's massive. Like nothing I've ever seen. On the sonar screen, something appeared. A shape in the darkness. At first it looked like a wall, a cliff rising from the ocean floor. But cliffs didn't pulse. Cliffs didn't glow with faint blue light. Cliffs didn't have a heartbeat. Slow to 1/4 speed, Yuna ordered. Her voice was barely a whisper. Turn on all external lights. The horizon's floodlights blazed to life. And there it was. The creature filled their entire field of vision. It was gray and mottled, like stone that had learned to breathe. Its skin was covered in patterns that glowed softly blue, lines and curves that looked almost like writing. The glow pulsed slowly, steadily, like a heart beating once every 10 seconds. Morey made a small sound. It might have been a prayer. It might have been a curse. How big is it? Someone asked. Yuna didn't know who. Everyone was speaking in whispers now, as if afraid to wake it. Sunho checked his instruments. His hands were shaking. The sonar can't find the edges. It's at least 3 kilometers long. Maybe more. Maybe much more. They drifted closer. The floodlights could only show a small piece of the creature at a time. They saw something that might have been a fin rising like a mountain into the darkness above. They saw ridges that could have been ancient bones. They saw patterns in the skin that looked like maps of forgotten places, and then they found the eye. It was closed. The lid was thick and heavy, covered in the same glowing patterns as the rest of the body. But even closed, even sleeping, it was terrifying. The eye alone was bigger than a football stadium, bigger than the entire horizon. If it opened, it would see them like humans see ants. Play the signal, Yuna said. Morey's finger hovered over the button. Captain, are we sure about this? Once we do this, we can't take it back. We don't know what it will do. We don't know if it's friendly or hostile. We don't know anything. I know that up there people are dying. I know that the aliens are winning. I know that this is the only chance we have. Yuna looked at her crew, at their scared faces and their brave hearts. Play it. The signal went out through the external speakers. It was a low sound, so low it was almost below human hearing. It vibrated through the water and through the hole and through their bones. It felt old. It felt like a voice calling across millions of years. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then the blue patterns on the creature's skin flared bright. So bright that they had to shield their eyes. So bright that the darkness of the deep ocean vanished completely. The eye opened. It was golden, like looking into a sun. The pupil was black and deep and endless, and it found the horizon immediately. It focused on them with a retention that was not animal, not mindless. There was intelligence in that eye. Ancient intelligence. Patient intelligence. Yuna felt something touch her mind. Not words, the creature did not speak in words, but feelings, images, memories that were not hers. She saw oceans that covered the entire earth. She saw creatures that had lived and died before humans ever existed. She saw the long sleep, the patient waiting, slow dreams of something that had watched civilizations rise and fall like waves on a beach, and she saw purpose. The creature knew why they had come. It knew about the threat above. It had been waiting for this moment. Waiting for someone to ask for help, the creature moved. The entire ocean seemed to shake. The horizon tumbled backwards, caught in currents that the creature's movement created. Alarms screamed. Systems failed. Sunho shouted something about the engines, but Yuna barely heard him. She was watching the creature rise, watching it unfold limbs that had been wrapped around itself for 60 million years, watching it stretch and grow and wake. It was going up, toward the surface, toward the aliens, toward war. The creature rose through the darkness like a god waking from death. It moved faster than anything so large should be able to move. The water around it boiled with force. The pressure waves it created were like underwater earthquakes, shaking the ocean floor and sending shockwaves in every direction. The horizon tumbled through the chaos. Warning lights flashed red across every console. The hull groaned under pressures it was never designed to handle. Yuna gripped her chair and shouted orders that were lost in the noise. Sunho's hands flew across his controls. Main engines offline? Backup power at 40%. Were caught in the current. They were being pulled upward. The creature's wake was dragging them toward the surface like leaves caught in a river. Yuna could see it on the screens, the massive shape above them, blocking out everything, filling the entire ocean with its body. "How deep are we?" she yelled. 7,000 meters and rising. 6,000. 5. Murray's voice was high with panic. "We're going up too fast. If we hit the surface at this speed, all hands brace for impact." Yuna grabbed the emergency radio. "Sunho, can you give me anything? Thrusters? Brakes? Anything?" "I'm trying." The young engineer was sweating, his glasses sliding down his nose. "The current is too strong. We're just along for the ride." Above them, the creature continued its rise. Its body was so vast that they could only see pieces of it as they tumbled past. A tentacle, the width of a river. A fin that stretched for kilometers. Skin covered in those glowing blue patterns, now burning bright as stars. On the surface of the Pacific Ocean, the sea began to change. Fishing boats 100 kilometers away felt the first waves. Small swells that grew larger every second. Ships that had survived hurricanes and typhoons began to rock dangerously. Sailors looked at each other with fear in their eyes, and then the ocean rose. It was not a wave. It was not a tsunami. It was the entire sea lifting upward as something pushed through it from below. Water that had been flat and calm suddenly became a mountain, rising higher and higher. Impossibly high. Admiral Dennock was in the middle of planning the next phase of the invasion when his officers began to scream. He looked at the screens that showed Earth's surface and saw something his mind could not understand. The ocean was breaking open. A shape was emerging. No, not a shape. A creature, a living thing that defied everything the Vorath knew about biology, about physics, about the limits of life itself. "What is that?" Dennock whispered. In 300 years of conquest, he had never whispered. He had never needed to doubt the Leviathan breached. Its head broke the surface. First, if it could be called a head. It was like a mountain of flesh, covered in those glowing patterns with eyes that burned golden even in daylight. Water poured off its body in waterfalls that would have drowned cities. It rose higher and higher and higher still. Tentacles emerged next. Dozens of them, each one thick enough to wrap around the largest. Buildings on Earth. They reached toward the sky like arms stretching after a long sleep. Some of them were covered in spines. Some had mouths of their own, lined with teeth like broken glass. The creature's roar came next. It was not a sound that ears could hear. It was a sound that bones felt. It was a sound that shook the air itself, that shattered windows in Japan and Korea and China. Birds fell dead from the sky. Car alarms went off across 3 continents. People covered their ears and screamed. And their screams were lost in the greater scream of something that had not spoken in 60 million years. On the horizon, now floating on the surface like a toy boat in a bathtub, Yuna and her crew watched in silence. They had surfaced a kilometer from the creature. Even at that distance, it filled the entire horizon. Even at that distance, they had to look up to see where it ended. "Oh God," Mare said. Oh God, what did we do? What did we wake up?" The Vorath fleet reacted with trained precision. They had faced large creatures before: space whales, orbital jellyfish, things that lived in the void between stars. They had killed them all. This would be no different. 1,000 ships turned their weapons on the Leviathan. Admiral Venok gave the order to fire. The sky turned white, plasma beams and energy. Weapons struck the creature from every direction. The amount of firepower being used could have cracked a small moon. It could have burned continents. It was the kind of attack that ended civilizations. The Leviathan did not move. The weapons hit its skin, and nothing happened. The plasma splashed against its hide like rain against stone. The energy beams were absorbed, drawn into the glowing patterns on its body. The patterns pulsed brighter, as if the creature was feeding on the attack. Admiral Venok felt his blood turn cold. Increase power. All ships, maximum output. The fleet obeyed. The attack doubled in strength, then tripled. The air around the creature turned to fire. The water around it began to boil. The Leviathan turned its head toward the ships, and then it moved. One tentacle swept through the air. It moved faster than something so large had any right to move. It caught a squadron of fighter craft and crushed them like insects. Another tentacle rose higher, reaching into the clouds where the larger warships hovered. It grabbed a destroyer. The ship was 500 meters long, armed with weapons that could level cities. The tentacle wrapped around it like a hand closing around a toy. There was a sound of screaming metal, and then silence. The destroyer was gone, crushed, dropped into the ocean in pieces. The Leviathan opened its mouth. It was not like any mouth Una had ever seen. It was more like a cave, a tunnel, a portal to somewhere dark and hungry. Teeth the size of skyscrapers lined its edges. And from deep within, a light began to glow. A carrier ship tried to flee. It turned its engines to maximum and raced toward the upper atmosphere. The Leviathan's mouth glowed brighter, and then something shot out. It was not a weapon. It was not a beam. It was more like concentrated force, like the creature had screamed with such power that the sound itself became a weapon. The carrier came apart in the air. Metal and fire and bodies scattering across the sky. The invasion of Earth had lasted 6 hours. The battle for Earth lasted 6 minutes. When it was over, the sea was full of burning wreckage. Vorath ships fell from the sky like rain. Escape pods scattered in every direction, filled with soldiers who had never known defeat, learning what it felt like to run. The Leviathan floated in a sea of destruction. Its golden eyes scanned the sky, looking for more enemies. Finding none, it turned those eyes down toward the tiny submarine floating on the surface, down toward Una. For a moment, their eyes met. The creatures and the captains, ancient and young, inhuman and human. Una felt that touch in her mind again. That sense of communication beyond words. The creature was asking something, wanting something, waiting for something. "Thank you," Una whispered. She didn't know if it could hear her. She didn't know if it could understand. But she said it anyway. "Thank you." The golden eyes blinked. Once, slowly, and then the Leviathan turned away. It began to sink back into the ocean, its massive body sliding beneath the waves. The water closed over it like a curtain falling after a play. The surface grew calm. The sky grew quiet. The battle was over. But the battle was not truly over. Not yet. Admiral Venok had survived. His flagship, the Conqueror's Pride, had stayed high in orbit while the main fleet descended to deal with the creature. Now he looked at his screens and watched his empire's greatest invasion force burn in an alien ocean. 1,300 ships destroyed in minutes. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers dead. The pride of the Vorath military turned to floating scrap, metal by something that should not exist. His officers stood frozen at their stations. No one spoke. No one moved. They had never seen anything like this. They had never imagined anything like this could happen. Sir, one officer finally said. What do we do? The next hands were shaking. He hid them behind his back. A Vorath admiral did not show weakness. A Vorath admiral did not know fear. But the thing in the ocean had changed everything he knew about the universe. We still have 700 ships, he said. His voice was steady. He forced it to be steady. The creature has returned to the water. It seems to need the ocean. So we attack from space. We bomb the planet from orbit. We burn everything until there's nothing left. It was a desperate plan. It was the plan of someone who had lost and could not accept losing. But his officers obeyed. They always obeyed. The remaining Vorath fleet gathered in high orbit. They aimed their weapons at Earth's surface. Not at cities this time. Not at military bases. At the oceans. All of them. Every ocean on the planet. If we boil the seas, then Ox said, the creature will have nowhere to hide. It will die like everything else on this rock. Below, on the horizon, Sunho's instruments detected the power building in orbit. His face went white. They're charging weapons. All of them. They're going to fire on the oceans. Una looked at the sky. She couldn't see the ships from here, but she could feel them. Feel the hate and the fear and the desperation of an empire that had never lost before. Can we contact them? Tell them to stop. They're not responding to any signals. Murray grabbed Una's arm. The creature. It saved us once. Maybe it will save us again. But the Leviathan had disappeared. The ocean was calm and empty. Whatever ancient intelligence lived in that massive body, it had decided to return to its sleep. It had dealt with the immediate threat. It did not seem to care about what came next, or so they thought. Then Nock gave the order. Fire. 700 ships released their weapons at once. Beams of energy brighter than the sun lanced down toward Earth. They were aimed at the Pacific Ocean. At the place where the creature had emerged, the plan was simple. Boil the water, expose the monster. Kill it from space where it could not reach them. The beams fell like the wrath of gods, and then they stopped. Not stopped, redirected. Something was pulling them away from their targets, bending them like light through a lens. The energy that should have struck the ocean instead curved upward, spiraling into a single point in the sky. Then Ox stared at his screens in disbelief. What is happening? The point grew brighter. It was above the clouds now, a ball of stolen energy that pulsed with the same blue glow as the creature's skin. The patterns. The same patterns that covered the Leviathan were appearing in the sky itself, drawn in light and fire. Sir, an officer's voice cracked with terror. Energy readings off the scale. Something is rising from the ocean. The Leviathan had not gone to sleep. It had been waiting. It burst from the water a second time, but now it was different. Now its body crackled with the energy it had stolen from the Vorath weapons. Lightning danced across its skin. Its eyes burned not gold, but white. White like stars. White like the heart of a nuclear explosion. It rose higher than before. Higher than the clouds. Higher than the atmosphere itself. The Leviathan could fly. Its tentacles spread wide, catching the thin air, pushing against forces that had nothing to do with physics as humans or Vorath understood them. The creature was not bound by normal rules. It existed outside them. It had been old when the rules were written. It rose toward the fleet. Admiral Venok finally understood. The creature was not just a defender of Earth's oceans. It was a defender of Earth itself. It had let the first wave of ships come close so it could destroy them efficiently. It had returned to the water to rest and gather strength. And now it was coming for the survivors. Retreat. Then Nox screamed. All ships retreat. Hyperspace now. The fleet tried to run. Engines flared. Navigation systems calculated escape routes. Ships turned away from Earth, desperate to reach the safety of faster-than-light travel. The Leviathan did not let them. The energy, it had absorbed the energy the Vorath had. Foolishly given, it exploded, outward in a pulse that covered half the planet. It was not destructive. It was worse. It was an electromagnetic storm that fried every computer, every engine, every navigation system in the fleet. 700 ships went dark. They hung in space, powerless. As the creature rose to meet them, what happened next would be told in stories across the galaxy for 10,000 years. Humans watched from the surface, saw the flashes of light in the sky, heard the distant thunder of ships being torn apart. Satellites recorded fragments of the battle, a tentacle crushing a cruiser, teeth closing around a frigate, that terrible mouth screaming destruction at anything that moved. The Leviathan was not just powerful, it was smart. It targeted the command ships first, cutting off the fleet's leadership. Then it went for the weapon platforms, removing the ability to fight back. Then it hunted the troop transports, making sure no soldiers could escape to threaten Earth again. It fought like a general. It killed like a god. Admiral Venok watched from his dead flagship as the creature came for him. The Conqueror's pride was the last ship left. All around him, his officers were praying to gods the Vorath had abandoned centuries ago. Some were crying. Some were screaming. Some were simply silent, staring at death as it approached. The Leviathan's face filled the viewport. Its eye, that golden eye, now burning white, looked directly at Venok. He felt it in his mind. The touch. The communication images flooded his brain. He saw his fleet from above, tiny and weak. He saw the 17 worlds his empire had conquered, the species they had enslaved and destroyed. He saw it all through the creature's eyes, and for the first time, he understood how small the Vorath really were. Please, then, Ak whispered. He was begging. An admiral of the Vorath Empire was begging. Please spare me. I'll leave. We'll never return. Please. The creature considered him. Then a tentacle wrapped around the Conqueror's pride, then last. Transmission was captured by Earth's monitoring stations. A single word in the Vorath language that translated roughly to one human concept. Possible, then static, then silence. The Leviathan floated in the debris field that had once been an invasion fleet. It stayed there for a long time, as if making sure nothing survived, as if standing guard. Then slowly, it began to descend. It fell through the atmosphere like a meteor, but gentle, controlled. It touched the ocean without even making a wave and slid beneath the surface. The blue glow faded. The white fire dimmed. The Leviathan returned to the deep, and Earth was free. 3 days passed before anyone was brave enough to go near the water. The oceans that had always seemed so familiar now held a secret that changed everything. Every wave, every tide, every deep current was a reminder of what slept below. Fishermen stayed in port. Ships remained docked. The world held its breath and waited to see what would happen next. Nothing happened. The Leviathan slept. Why? UNA spent those 3 days being interviewed by every government on Earth. She sat in rooms with generals and presidents and prime ministers, telling the same story over and over. The descent, the signal, the awakening. The look in that golden eye when the creature first saw them. What does it want? They all asked. Why did it save us? Will it save us again? She had no answers. The creature had touched her mind, but it had not spoken in words. It had shown her feelings, memories, purposes that she could barely understand. It was old beyond imagining. It thought in ways that human minds could not follow. I think it was waiting, she told General Kim on the 3rd day. I think it knew this day would come. Not specifically, not the Vorath, but something like them. Something that would threaten Earth, and it was ready. How can something wait for 60 million years? I don't know. Maybe time means something different to it. Maybe it experiences time the way we experience seconds. Maybe it was dreaming of this moment all along. Her brother Doan had a different theory. He had been studying the data from the Horizon's instruments, the readings they had collected during the awakening. He called Yuna to his lab on the 4th day. Look at this, he said, pointing to a screen full of numbers. The electromagnetic patterns in its skin, they're not random. They're structured. They're almost like writing. Writing. Or maybe data. Or maybe something we don't have a word for. But it's organized information. Incredibly complex, organized information. You pulled up another screen. And when it touched your mind, your brain activity showed patterns that matched. For a few seconds, your neurons were firing in the same sequence as the creature's skin patterns. What does that mean? I think it downloaded something into you. Information, knowledge, maybe even instructions. Duan looked at her with something like, "You might be carrying messages from something that existed before humanity was born." The world began to rebuild. Cities that had been damaged by the alien landing forces were repaired. Governments that had panicked started to function again. Life returned to something like normal. But nothing was really normal anymore. Everything had changed. The United Nations held an emergency session. Every country agreed on one thing. They needed to understand the Leviathan. They needed to watch it, study it, and be ready in case it woke again. Not as a threat. One was foolish enough to think they could threaten it. But as the most important thing on the planet, Commander Cho Murray was given leadership of the new Deep Guardian Initiative. It was the biggest scientific project in human history. A permanent station was built above the Mariana Trench, floating on the surface with sensors reaching down into the darkness. Submarines patrolled the deep, keeping a respectful distance from the creature, but recording everything they could. Una visited Murray at the station 6 months after the invasion. The facility was impressive, a floating city of laboratories and monitoring equipment, staffed by scientists from every nation on Earth. But what struck Una most was the mood. These were not frightened people studying a monster. They were odd people studying a miracle. "We've detected heartbeats," Murray told her. "One beat every 11 seconds. Perfectly regular, never changing. And brain activity, or what we think is brain activity. It's dreaming, Una. We can see the patterns. It's dreaming about something." "What?" "We don't know. But sometimes the dreams change. Sometimes they spike in ways that look almost like anticipation." "Anticipation of what?" Murray looked out the window at the endless ocean. "Maybe that's what you're supposed to find out. You're the only human it ever communicated with. Maybe there's more it wants to tell you." Una thought about going back down. Sometimes she dreamed about it, the descent, the darkness, the golden eye opening. In her dreams, the creature spoke to her. Not in words, but in understanding. It showed her things that were coming. Things that waited in the stars. Things that Earth would face in the years ahead. The Voreth Empire was finished. Word spread across the galaxy of their defeat at Earth, a primitive planet, a species that had barely reached their own moon, had destroyed the most powerful invasion fleet in known space. Other civilizations sent messages, some curious, some afraid, some hoping to find allies. Earth was no longer alone in the universe, and Earth was no longer weak. But Una knew the truth. Earth was not strong. Humanity was not powerful. They had a guardian, something ancient and strange and beyond understanding. They were protected not by their own strength, but by the mercy of something that had been old when their ancestors were still fish in the sea 2 years after the invasion. She finally went back down. The horizon descended once more into the darkness. The same crew followed her, Murray, Sunho, and the others who had survived that first terrible day. They were not scared this time. They were honored. At 11,000 meters, they found the creature. It was exactly where they had left it, curled in the deepest trench on Earth, its patterns pulsing softly blue. "YUNA," ordered the signal played again. The eye opened, and this time, when the creature touched her mind, she was ready. She opened herself to it, let it show her what it wanted her to see. She saw the history of Earth, the dinosaurs and their end, the ice ages, the rise of mammals, the first humans standing upright and looking at the stars. She saw the Leviathan watching it all, patient and eternal, waiting for the children of Earth to grow. She saw the future too. Ships leaving Earth, carrying humans to other worlds. Encounters with other species, some peaceful, some not. And always, always, the Leviathan watching, waiting, ready to protect its world if protection was needed. The creature was not a weapon. It was not a pet. It was not a god. It was a parent. It had been here since the beginning of complex life on Earth. It had watched over the planet like a guardian watching over children. It let those children grow. Let them make mistakes. Let them learn. But when real danger came, when something from outside threatened to destroy everything, it woke. It fought. It protected. Yuna understood now why it had saved them. Not because humanity was special. Not because they had earned protection. But because they were Earth's children, and the Leviathan had sworn to protect Earth's children long before they existed. She pulled back from the connection. Tears were running down her face. She didn't know why she was crying, but she couldn't stop.
Right? What did it show you?
Mireille asked softly. Yuna looked at the creature, at its ancient skin, its pulsing patterns, its golden eye that held more wisdom than every human who had ever lived. She thought about what to say, how to explain something so vast to her crew, to her world, to her species. It showed me that we're not alone, she finally said. We never were, and we never will be. The eye blinked slowly, once like an agreement. Then the patterns faded, and the Leviathan returned to its dreams, and above. On the surface of a small blue planet, humanity looked at the stars with new eyes. They were no longer afraid of what waited in the darkness. They had a guardian. They had a protector. They had something that would stand between them and anything that threatened their world. The galaxy would learn to fear Earth, not because of human weapons or human armies, but because of what slept in their oceans, what dreamed in their depths, what would wake again if any enemy ever dared to return. The Leviathan was patient, and the Leviathan was eternal, and Earth was home.